We did our video on respiration types and how they differ. Respiration is the process by which electrons generated from the oxidation of an energy substrate are transferred through the electron transport system to yield energy. Every living organism uses the process of cellular respiration. Cellular respiration can be carried out by two different pathways: aerobic, which is in the presence of oxygen, and anaerobic, which is in the absence of oxygen.
Aerobic respiration takes place in the presence of oxygen. A chemical reaction takes place and results in the breakdown of energy molecules obtained by carbohydrates, mainly glucose, proteins, and lipids. When a glucose molecule is broken down in the presence of oxygen, energy is released along with carbon dioxide and water as the byproducts of the reaction. The energy produced is stored in the form of adenosine triphosphate molecules to carry out the various metabolic processes.
Aerobic respiration in the mitochondria is broken down into four membrane complexes. NADH transports a pair of electrons to complex 1, the mitochondrial matrix, NADH dehydrogenase. A flavoprotein with the bound factor flavin mononucleotide is present in this complex, FMN. FMN accepts electrons from NADH and transfers them to iron sulfur protein, iron sulfide centers. During the transition, 4 proteins leave complex 1. Succinate dehydrogenase complex 2 accepts electrons carried by FADH2. Complex 1 is bypassed by these electrons. Since these electrons did not go through complex 1's protein pumping action, their ATP yield is reduced. The electrons from complexes 1 and 2 are transferred to coenzyme Q. CoQ, quinones transport hydrogen electrons from complexes 1 and 2 to complexes 3 and 4. In complex 3, protein pumping occurs once more. Cytochromes are electron transporting proteins with an iron atom in the middle that alternates between Fe3+ and Fe2+, as it accepts and releases electrons. A, B, and C are the 3 cytochromes involved. Before being moved, electrons passing through complex 3 pass through two groups, an iron sulfur nucleus and a C group. They are moved to complex 4 from C.
Glycolysis is the first step in aerobic respiration, and it takes place in the cell cytosol. The glucose molecules are split and divided into 2 ATP and 2 NADH molecules during the glycolysis process, which are then used in the aerobic respiration process. The formation of acetyl coenzyme A is the second step in aerobic respiration. Pyruvate is oxidized in the mitochondria, resulting in the formation of a 2-carbon acetyl group. Coenzyme A binds to the newly formed 2-carbon acetyl group, resulting in acetyl coenzyme A. The citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle, is the third step in aerobic respiration. The oxaloacetate reacts with the acetyl coenzyme A to create citric acid during this stage of aerobic respiration. After a series of reactions, the citric acid cycle releases 2 molecules of carbon dioxide, 1 molecule of ATP, and reduced forms of NADH and FADH. In aerobic respiration, this is the final step. Large amounts of ATP molecules are formed in this process by transferring electrons from NADH and FADH. A single molecule of glucose generates 34 molecules of ATP. An example of aerobic respiration. The oxygen gas reaches the plant cells during the respiration process through the stomata, which are located in the epidermis of leaves and stems. All green plants synthesize their food and release energy via the photosynthesis process.
The second type of respiration is anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration takes place without the use of oxygen. It uses some other organic or inorganic molecule as a terminal electron acceptor. It produces only a small amount of energy and is therefore used for short-term energy needs. For example, a short-term wrestling match. Alcohol or lactic acid or other compounds are produced as waste products depending on the kind of cells that are active. Only 2 glucose molecules are used since this is a low energy process. The reactants are just glucose rather than glucose and oxygen in aerobic respiration.
In anaerobic respiration process, glycolysis, which is the first step, is anaerobic cellular respiration. This step yields 2 ATP molecules. The product of glycolysis is pyruvate that is used in anaerobic respiration fermentation. This anaerobic respiration fermentation helps in the production of ethanol and NAD+, or for production of lactate and NAD+. The production of NAD+ is very necessary as glycolysis uses it, and if there is a depletion of NAD+, it will lead to cell death. Anaerobic respiration process follows the Krebs cycle and occurs in the fluid of cytoplasm. The major energy yield of aerobic respiration takes place in the mitochondria. A lot of energy goes waste in the form of ethanol and lactate molecules as the cell cannot utilize them. Instead, they excrete these products as waste. Anaerobic respiration takes place in the form of 2 pathways, alcohol fermentation and lactic acid fermentation.
An example of anaerobic respiration. If you are exercising a lot, you could be using up glucose faster than oxygen is being pumped into your cells. Cellular respiration cannot take place fast enough to supply all the energy the body needs, so cells switch over to anaerobic respiration since it can take place quickly and in short bursts. The differences between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Both anaerobic and aerobic respiration involve a first stage known as glycolysis. In anaerobic respiration, the additional stage is fermentation, but in aerobic respiration, there's the Krebs cycle and electron transfer chain. Combustion is complete in aerobic respiration, but incomplete in anaerobic respiration.
These are the different formulas between aerobic and anaerobic respiration.
Cellular respiration in different organisms. Obligate aerobes are organisms that cannot survive without oxygen, such as humans. Obligate anaerobes are organisms that cannot survive in the presence of oxygen. Example is written right there, which causes tetanus. Aerotolerant organisms are organisms that can live in the presence of oxygen but does not use it to grow. Example, the bacteria that causes strep throat. Facultative aerobes are organisms that can use oxygen to grow but can also perform anaerobic respiration. An example is the bacteria, which is the yeast used in brewing. And these are our sources.